They say the heir to the miller's fortune is cold, aloof, and utterly unapproachable. For years, not a single woman has been seen entering or leaving the estate. But I'd only known Gray for half a month, and he'd already dropped 30 grand on me and given me the run of his mansion. My friends were all deeply impressed, demanding to know my secret. Lying in bed, I took a bite of an apple slice the great heir himself had just offered me and calmly explained. It's simple, really. Just 3 sentences. Hey, handsome. Nice car. You really sent me flying. Everyone said Gray, the heir to the Millers, was exceptionally cold and impersonal. His icy aura was apparently strong enough to give a stray dog frostbite from 10 paces away. So, when the gossip circle found out that Gray had personally brought me home to the estate, they were all shocked. Some guessed I had slept my way into his bed. Others suspected I'd been hired as his personal chef. And then there were those who were convinced Gray was a crime lord who dabbled in everything, and I was just some poor schmuck who'd crossed him and was now being held for interrogation and torture. I was scrolling through that post, my feet kicked up on the bed, marveling at everyone's vivid imagination. So what's the deal? Christina, how the hell did you get into the house? My bestie asked over the phone, just as baffled as everyone else. I let out a long sigh. You all have a deep misunderstanding of Gray. Getting into his house is easy. You just need a car. My friend was confused. A car? I continued, and a spot on the pavement to lie down on. She choked. Lie down? I closed my eyes. Just remember to pull your legs in quick. Otherwise, you might end up in the Miller's cemetery instead. My friend was silent for a few seconds before speaking with a newfound reverence. With guts like that, you deserve to be in that house. Pleased with the praise, I hung up, feeling satisfied. When I turned my head, I saw Gray himself, standing in the doorway. His gaze was intense as he stared at me. He'd clearly been listening for a while. So, Christina. From the car accident until now, this was all part of your plan? I thought for a moment. The only thing I planned was my 3 lines. Hey, handsome. Nice car. You really sent me flying. 3 days ago, I was just a regular college student working part-time at a high-end club. I'd seen Gray before. He was drinking in the VIP lounge on the 3rd floor while I was downstairs getting chewed out like a dog. I don't remember why I was being yelled at, but I'll never forget the look he gave me from above. Cold, silent, superior. I swore to myself right then and there. One day, I was going to bag a guy just like that. After his Volkswagen sent me flying, I became even more determined. He drives a VW, I thought. He can't be that rich. So I decided to go big. Once the doctor confirmed my left ankle was fractured, I demanded Gray pay me $30,000. If he couldn't afford the cash, he could pay me back with his person. Gray was stunned by my demand. He had the doctor run a CT scan on my brain. Only after confirming my head was fine did he speak. Do you have any idea how much it costs to fix the paint your bicycle scraped off my car? How much could a beat-up VW possibly cost? I scoffed. 3 grand? I can cover that. It's just a Volkswagen. Don't try to rip me off. Gray was silent for a few seconds, then pulled out his phone, did a quick search, and showed me the screen. That was the day I learned something new. There's a type of Volkswagen called a Phaeton. That Volkswagen Phaeton was the cheapest car in his entire garage. Gray drove it when he went out drinking so he wouldn't care if it got scratched parked outside the club. You should have just driven a Maybach, I thought. At least then I wouldn't have been so humiliatingly wrong. I handed his phone back and spoke calmly. All right, look. Since you're handsome, I'll cut you a deal. Pay me $500. You know, after my insurance covers most of the bill. Gray stared at me for a few seconds, then suddenly leaned in and tilted my chin up. Do one thing for me, and I'll double your compensation. Staring at his handsome face, so close to mine, I had to swallow a few times before I could speak shyly. You don't have to double it. Gray said, then I won't. I replied, no, not double. Triple. Gray chuckled softly. His fingers tapped on his phone, and he sent me an electronic invitation. It was for a yacht party in half a month. I didn't understand. Gray brushed off some non-existent dust from his sleeve. You'll go with me, he said lightly. As my date. I looked troubled. But my foot is broken. I'll be in a wheelchair. Gray said, I'll have a bodyguard push you. I frowned. But I'll be sitting so low. I'll have to look up at everyone. Gray said, I'll have a bodyguard lift you. I thought of future problems. But what if the ship sinks? I'm a cripple, I can't swim to save myself. Gray said, I'll have a bodyguard, that's not a possibility. Why wasn't it a possibility? They said the Titanic was unsinkable, too. Gray tolerated my ominous ramblings and brought me back to the Gu estate, where his private doctor was tasked with taking care of my foot. And that's how I ended up here, with the yacht party just one day away. I beckoned to Gray, who was still standing in the doorway. What is it? Gray walked in with a cold smile. Don't think you can just change the subject and I'll forget about the car accident you orchestrated. I tooted. Why are you still hung up on that? I've already moved on. Gray blinked. Who said you could move on? I ignored him and asked what I really wanted to know. Why me? Why did you pick me to be your date? Gray looked at me. You really want to know? I nodded eagerly. He pulled a chair over to my bedside and casually picked up an apple slice. Do you remember if there was someone else in my car when the accident happened? Huh? I paused. I honestly didn't remember. I passed out right after delivering my 3 lines. The person in the passenger seat was supposed to be my date for the party, Gray said. But the accident hit her in the face and messed up her new nose job. She can't be seen in public for a while. I suddenly felt a pang of guilt. So, you see. Gray pressed his silver fork into the fruit platter, his eyes narrowing again. Don't you think you owe me a date? What could I say? I was a victim too, but it seemed I wasn't entirely blameless. Whatever. It was just a party. I'd treat it like a free buffet. But my simple-minded plan was quickly shattered. That afternoon, a team of people arrived at the estate, carrying bags and boxes of all sizes, even a small shipping crate. What was going on? Was Gray planning on leaving nothing but the load-bearing walls behind for this party? Christina. Gray stood on the staircase and waved me over. Come here. I got in my wheelchair, took the elevator, and finally rode a robot vacuum over to him. What's up? Gray glanced at the flashing red warning light on the vacuum. Scram, get back. I said, you got it. Gray coughed, then lifted me off the robot vacuum. I was talking to the vacuum. Its name is Scram. Wow, what a moody name. I stared, wide-eyed, as Gray directed people to open the boxes. After spending half a month with him, I realized Gray wasn't at all like the cold, heartless person everyone made him out to be. He was cold, but he had a heart. What are you looking at? Gray opened one of the cases and gestured for someone to hang up its contents. See which one you like. I was stunned. The boxes were filled with evening gowns. As my date, you can't look cheap, he said. There were dozens of dresses, not to mention jewelry and shoes. My eyes started to blur from the sheer number of options, and the diamonds were so bright I was starting to see spots. This one, I said, squinting as I chose a less flashy, dark green dress. Gray cleared the room so I could try it on. Wearing the gown, I looked in the mirror and had no idea who that girl was. Gray walked in, his face blank. Did you swap out your eyeballs when you changed? I shot him a glare. Did you have no childhood? Don't you know the "who's that girl" makeover trope? Gray came and stood behind me, meeting my eyes in the mirror. I didn't really have a childhood. I took over the family business at 16. There was no time for one. His eyes were dark and, when emotionless, looked like two chilled black grapes. I met his gaze for a few seconds before speaking slowly. If you're willing to call me Daddy, I can give you the childhood you never had. Gray was not willing. I sighed with regret. Gray tightened the straps of the dress. I could barely breathe. Daddy, your daughter is suffocating. His hands loosened, and he shot me a glare. What nonsense are you talking about? He then looked down, his palm resting on the small of my back, slowly measuring. You're too thin. The dress needs to be altered. I could feel his hand on my waist, his cool fingertips tracing my skin, making me shiver involuntarily. Why are you shaking? Gray looked up at me, his gaze deep. I swallowed. My one good foot is getting sore from standing. Gray continued to adjust the dress. Then stand on the other one, he said casually. He was right. Why didn't I think of that? So, without hesitation, I switched feet. Ah. Daddy. My foot. Gray's eyes widened, and he shot out his hands to catch me as I stumbled. I crashed into his arms, my nose hitting his shoulder. The sharp pain brought tears to my eyes. Does it hurt that much? Gray froze, a little panicked. I'll call the doctor. Daddy, I said, my voice muffled as I held my nose. If my nose gets crooked too, will you have time to find a new date? Gray half knelt, letting me sit on his supportive right leg as one of his hands gently moved mine away. My eyes were red as I looked at him nervously. Dad. Shut up. I pouted but stayed quiet. It's fine, nothing's broken, Gray said, relieved, though his brow furrowed again. And don't you dare call me that again. I mumbled, don't all guys joke about being each other's daddy? Why are you being so serious all of a sudden? Gray was speechless. Are you a guy? I thought for a moment. Isn't that how people in your circle joke around? Calling each other all sorts of things, playing around. Gray paused at my words. After a few seconds, a half-smile played on his lips. That shouldn't be said here. It should be said in bed. Adults have such dirty minds. Especially me. After Gray said that, I took it as some kind of hint. I even managed to take a shower that night, despite my broken ankle. But by midnight, Gray still hadn't shown up. Damn him and his purity. After silently cursing him out, I rolled over, wrapped myself in the blanket, and prepared to sleep. Suddenly, the bedroom door clicked open. Someone was coming in. I was instantly wide awake. Could it be? Was this it? The person approached slowly. I quickly shut my eyes, pretending to be asleep, and shifted to show off my more delicate and attractive left profile. Closer, right by the bed, a hand reached out. I was confused. Never mind not kissing me, why was he fumbling with my pillow? Did he have a secret stash of cash hidden in the guest room pillows? I continued to feign sleep until the shadow left. Then I threw the pillow aside. And saw a fruit knife lying underneath it. Next to the knife was a small note. If you don't want to die, get out of the house. What was this? A death threat? The handwriting was a mess, like it had been written with their feet. Disgusted, I threw the note in the trash and limped to the bathroom to wash my hands. When I came out, a figure flashed by the door. I jumped, nearly falling, but a hand shot out and steadied me. Doing the tango in the middle of the night instead of sleeping? Gray frowned at me. One of my hands was still pressed against his chest. The feeling was too good to pass up, so I ignored his sarcastic tone. What are you doing here? Gray was wearing gold-rimmed glasses and a silk robe, looking both lazy and noble. Just finished up some urgent work, he said lightly. Saw your door was open, so I came to check. I stared at him, trying to tell if he was lying. Gray calmly pulled my hand off his chest and then turned my head, forcing me to look away. If there's nothing else, get to sleep. You have an early day tomorrow. I said, oh, but then grabbed his sleeve again. Wait. Gray's gaze returned to me, an eyebrow raised suggestively. Something else you need? I was very serious. Yes, something big. Gray paused, his playful expression fading. What is it? Get me a new pillow, I said. A question mark seemed to appear over Gray's head. Why? What's wrong with this one? I put on a grave face. This one might have foot fungus. Gray was speechless. The next morning, Gray dragged me out of bed to get ready. By 3 in the afternoon, we were on the yacht. I have to say, the sea is a whole different world from the land. So wild. After I'd winked at the fifth handsome guy, Gray finally finished his schmoozing and returned to my side. How are you feeling? He asked. I smiled, satisfied. Fantastic. The bodyguard behind me immediately began his report. While you were away, Christina said hello 10 times, nodded 7 times, got 5 new contacts, and called 3 different men handsome. Dude, we're both just working stiffs here. Why are you siding with the capitalist? Just as Gray was about to get angry, a delicate voice calling Gray broke the tension. The newcomer wore a stunning red dress and was very beautiful, except for one small flaw. Her nose was a little crooked. Wait a minute. The nose job girl? I thought she couldn't be seen in public. The bodyguard whispered to me that one's nose was always crooked. Ah, I see. Gray, why did you come to the party alone? Weren't we all supposed to bring a date? Only then did the woman in red glance my way, her tone dripping with fake surprise. Oh, I'm so sorry, miss. I didn't see you there. You blend in so well with all the green buffet food. I shook my head. It's fine. Most people with eyesight as bad as yours would have gouged their own eyes out by now. The fact that you can still apologize to me is really impressive. The woman's face flushed with anger, making her nose look even more crooked. But the friend next to her pulled her back. Don't go too far. I heard she's the daughter of a rich family. Hearing this, both Gray and I fell silent for a second. It wasn't technically wrong. The problem was, the rich family in question was a nightclub. And at best, I was just a part-time waitress. I wouldn't dare call myself a daughter of the family. The woman in red's anger visibly subsided, but she still muttered, "What rich family? I've never heard of them." I looked curiously at her friend. You've heard of me? The friend gave an awkward laugh. No, not really. It's just that my family's housekeeper is old friends with the Millers' head maid. I heard it from her. I'd met the Millers' head maid. She was a stern-looking old woman who had supposedly watched Gray grow up. If she knew Gray had brought home a rich family's daughter, she'd probably blow a gasket. Wait a minute. I stroked my chin, thinking. Could she have been the one who snuck into my room last night? Did she want to scare me away because Gray had brought home someone who wasn't from a proper background? But the old woman had a noticeable limp. Was the person last night limping? What are you staring at? They're gone. Gray's voice brought me back. He looked at me, his tone nonchalant. This boat is full of social climbers. Don't think for a second your charm is enough to conquer the world, Christina. That sarcastic tone again. I mentally tooted, then turned to him with a dazzling smile. I don't have such grand ambitions. I only need to conquer you. It was so quiet, I thought we'd run out of things to say forever. Gray's face went from red to white and back again, before he finally let out a cold humph and walked away. I turned back to the bodyguard. Is your boss always this shy? The bodyguard looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Never mind. I made a zip-it gesture. I have a feeling whatever you're about to say is something I don't want to hear, so just don't. But the bodyguard insisted on speaking. Christina, I advise you not to get too serious about our boss. Why not? The voice came from behind me. I blinked and turned around to see Gray had circled back from the other side of the buffet table. He was glaring at the bodyguard. Why shouldn't she get too serious? State your reasons. The bodyguard probably never imagined he'd get caught bad-mouthing his boss behind his back. He flailed for a moment before stammering, because our boss is a man of deep and profound love and loyalty. He put on a grave expression. If you two fell in love, his love would be so heavy, it would crush you, Christina. Wow. With quick thinking like that, I had to give him a round of applause. Gray nodded slowly. Get lost. The bodyguard replied, you got it. Gray scoffed, then started pushing my wheelchair. The wind is picking up. Let's go back to the cabin. Our suite was on the 7th floor. While we were waiting for the elevator, I heard what sounded like an argument coming from the end of the hall. The voice was familiar. I thought it was the woman with the crooked nose. Gray heard it too, but he clearly had no intention of getting involved and just waited quietly for the elevator. Gray already brought someone. What are you so worried about? If something really happens, he won't be able to get out of it clean. Huh? What did that have to do with Gray? Didn't he bring his girlfriend? That rich girl is going to make trouble for us if she finds out. Hey. What did that have to do with me? Rich girl my ass. She's probably just some random trash he picked up. Gray has a real fiancé. What did that have to do with some other woman? The elevator dinged, and Gray pushed me inside without a change in expression. It was quiet in the elevator. I couldn't help but ask, don't you have anything to say? Gray looked down at me. What do you want to know about? You? Me? Or the fiancé they mentioned? I caught the sharp edge in his tone and wisely dropped the subject, but my mind was racing. No wonder Gray wanted me to come with him to this party. There was something else going on. But what could be so serious that even Gray couldn't get out of it clean? 1,000 possibilities flashed through my mind until the elevator stopped. We were on the 7th floor. Gray pushed me into the suite and, with a click, locked the door behind us. Gray. As he slowly advanced on me, I grew nervous, swallowing hard. What are you doing? Gray seemed to smile as he leaned down to meet my eyes. What are you so nervous about? Weren't you going to conquer me? Isn't this the perfect opportunity? My senses were suddenly filled with the scent of his cologne. I felt a little dizzy as I tentatively reached out, grabbed his tie, and gave it a tug. How should I do that? Like this? Gray probably didn't expect me to actually make a move. He stumbled forward, his lips just inches from mine. He didn't pull back, just raised an eyebrow. Didn't you hear them? I have a fiancé. I was skeptical. For real? If you're lying, may your future son be born without a, you know what? Gray replied, for real. Damn. For him to still say yes after a curse that vicious, it had to be true. My interest immediately vanished. I patted his cheek. Then you can go back to saving yourself for your fiancé. But Gray moved closer, his hands gripping the arms of my wheelchair, his gaze sharp and deep. Don't you want to know who this fiancé is? I froze, a sliver of nervous hope rising within me as I stared into the depths of his eyes. Is it, me? Gray's answer was firm. No. Then why the hell did you ask? A surge of anger rose in me, and I balled up my fists and punched him twice. What is wrong with you? Gray started to say something, but we both heard a loud creak. We both froze. What was that sound? The next second, the armrests of the wheelchair snapped outwards. Caught off guard, Gray pitched forward and slammed his head right into my stomach. Oh, God. I cried out, doubling over in pain. My stomach. Christina. Gray's voice was muffled. Let go. Let me get up. I managed to loosen my arms. Gray quickly got up and lifted me onto the bed. Just lie here, I'll get the doctor. The door closed, leaving me to wail dramatically on the bed alone. I hadn't been at it for more than a few seconds when the door suddenly opened again. I groaned weakly. That was fast, hey? My body suddenly felt weightless. I was thrown over someone's shoulder, the impact nearly making me vomit. You, bodyguard? Didn't you get lost? The bodyguard put a finger to his lips. Quiet. I'm getting you out of here. I was completely bewildered. Taking me where? His tone was full of exasperation. I told you to get out of the goo house. Why didn't you listen? I paused. That note, that was you? The bodyguard was practically sprinting through the ship's corridors with me on his shoulder. It was me. Do you have any idea why the boss brought you on this ship? My head was spinning. Wasn't it for the party? The bodyguard scoffed. Party, my ass. I overheard him on the phone before we left. He's here for one of those parties. What kind of party? You know, the kind where everyone swaps partners. A skinny little thing like you would go in on your feet and come out in a box. Someone was walking down the hall. The bodyguard panicked, yanked open a random door, and ducked inside with me. The shock was finally starting to wear off, but I still couldn't believe it. Gray seems like such an upstanding guy. Why would he be involved in something like that? There are plenty of two-faced scumbags in the world. The bodyguard said nervously. I heard his fiancée refuses to marry him and keeps putting it off because she found out about all the dirty stuff he does. Dirty stuff? I couldn't help but think of what everyone said about Gray, cold, aloof, ruthless, walking on both sides of the law. The more I thought, the colder my back felt. I quickly asked the bodyguard, so what do we do now? Before I could finish, the bodyguard sniffed the air. Do you smell something? It's pretty strong. He looked around, his eyes finally landing on a small perfume bottle on a nearby cabinet. The moment he opened the cap, a familiar scent filled the air. I froze. Why did that smell so much like Gray's cologne? The bodyguard slammed the cap back on, his face twisted in disgust. This scent is so weird. You don't think it's one of those aphrodisiacs, do you? Christina, this boat is probably full of bad news. We need to get out of here, now. I thought he had a point. The bodyguard hoisted me back onto his shoulder and cautiously opened the door. We're. His voice caught in his throat. Because of how he was carrying me, my head was facing inwards while my butt was facing the door. I couldn't see what was happening, but when he stopped talking, my heart sank. Why'd you stop running? Smack. The answer came in the form of a hard slap on my behind. Before I could even cry out in pain, an arm wrapped around my waist, and I was pulled into a familiar embrace. My heart trembled. I looked up and met Gray's dark, furious eyes. Where do you think you're going, Christina? I can explain. In the suite's bedroom, I was huddled under the covers, looking up at Gray with pleading eyes. I caught you red-handed. How can you possibly explain this? Gray walked over, looming over me. Is running away some kind of family tradition, Christina? I paused at his words, not understanding, before Gray grabbed my hand and, without another word, snapped a pair of silver handcuffs around my wrist. Whoa, you're into this stuff? I stared at the handcuffs, which were clearly novelty items, and was momentarily speechless. If I play along, will you promise not to give me away to someone else? Gray seemed confused. What? Gray, I don't want to go in on my feet and come out in a box. I forced a few tears, putting on my most obedient face. At the same time, I wrapped my arms around his neck, my palms sliding inconspicuously to the back of his neck. Just find the carotid artery, press down hard, and once he's out, I can run. Just as my fingers were probing for the right spot, my hand was suddenly grabbed. Gray pinned my hand to the back of his neck with one hand and gripped my chin with the other, a wry smile on his face. Find it yet? I froze. What? Gray guided my hand to the side of his neck. The carotid sinus. Pressure here can cause fainting. Pressure on both sides for more than 30 seconds could cause cardiac arrest. He pressed my hand harder, almost as if he wanted to break through the skin. Isn't this what you were looking for? Gray. I could see his expression had turned ugly, and panic set in. Let go. Gray's dark eyes stared straight into mine, a mix of fury and resentment swirling within them. If I let go, you'll really have no escape. Christina, are you sure you want me to let go? Damn it, this man was crazy. I immediately stopped struggling. If I actually killed him, who was I going to complain to? Sensing my surrender, Gray's expression softened, and the pressure on my hand lessened. Good girl. Now, tell me, why were you running away? My eyes were red as I played the victim. I already told you. I don't want you to give me away, and I don't want to go to some kind of sex party. Gray's brow furrowed. What sex party? Still pretending. I sniffed, on the verge of tears. And here I was, so excited for our trip on this yacht. Turns out you were just going to trade me away. Wah. Gray's face darkened, and he leaned over me. Christina, I don't care who you've been listening to, but that will never happen. I huffed, catching the scent on him and mumbling, you reek of aphrodisiac yourself, and you're still denying it. Gray paused, then reached out to touch my face. No wonder you've been talking nonsense. Did you smell something you shouldn't have? Now that he mentioned it, I did feel like my breathing was a little ragged, and my face felt hot where he was touching it. I leave you alone for 5 minutes, and you managed to get yourself into this much trouble. Gray must have noticed my temperature was off, because his touch became gentler. Where does it hurt? I blinked, tilting my cheek down to rub it against his palm. Everywhere hurts. Can you just let me go, please? Gray seemed to smile, his knuckles stroking my face softly. Christina, do you know that you have, I'm about to cause trouble, written all over your face? That's ridiculous. My face is way too small to fit 4 whole words. Just as I was about to argue, Gray suddenly covered my mouth and shushed me. As he did, I heard a faint rustling sound from the doorway. It sounded like someone was trying to get in. It definitely wasn't housekeeping at this hour. Besides, this was the presidential suite. No one would dare enter without Gray's permission. I met Gray's eyes. He lifted the blanket, pulled me under with him, and we both held our breath. The bedroom door soon creaked open. The person who entered was whispering. Hurry up. It wasn't easy getting Gray's bodyguard out of the way. I'll go light that incense, you go change into that see-through dress in the bathroom. The other person's voice was hesitant, clearly nervous. Are you sure this will work? They say Gray is ruthless. What are you worried about? The first person said. Don't you want a life of luxury? Besides, all men think with their dicks. With that incense to help things along, he'll never be able to push you away. And your family's status isn't bad either, so it's not like he's losing out. Don't worry, I had a master read your fortune. After tonight, we'll be set for life. Huddled under the blankets, I finally understood what was happening. They were trying to sleep their way into Gray's bed. At that thought, I carefully peeked at Gray's face. TSK, it was as black as the bottom of a pot. Sensing my gaze, Gray's arm tightened around my waist. His lips moved. What are you looking at? His arm was wrapped around a particularly ticklish spot, and I couldn't help but squirm. Clink. The chain of my handcuff swayed, the sound echoing clearly in the quiet room. Someone's here. The 2 schemers obviously heard it too, and realizing the sound came from the bed, their minds instantly jumped to conclusions. Damn it, did someone beat us to it? A set of footsteps stomped towards the bed, the person's voice full of aggression. I want to see just who dares to steal my spot in this bed. The blanket was violently ripped away. In the dead silence, I looked at the dumbfounded face of the crooked-nosed woman and offered a strained smile. Good evening. It was the middle of the night, and I was sitting on the bed wrapped in a blanket, drowsy. Is it off yet? Gray sat beside me, his tone a little embarrassed. The chain is tangled. I pouted. This is your fault for getting so worked up. If I hadn't tried to stop you, my handcuff chain wouldn't have gotten tangled in your belt. Rewind 30 minutes. Gray, having narrowly avoided being drugged and taken advantage of, had been about to leap up and tear someone apart. To save the crooked-nosed woman from a grisly fate, I had instinctively tried to hold him back. As it happened, Gray was wearing a casual suit with a rather flashy chain belt. In a stroke of terrible luck, my handcuff chain had gotten hopelessly tangled with his. The crooked-nosed woman and her friend had been escorted away by security 10 minutes ago, but we were still stuck. Just find some pliers and break it, I said, yawning again. I casually picked up a small jar from the bed. What's this? It's pretty. Gray looked up, his expression changing. Don't open. Too late. With a pop, I'd pulled the cork out. A spray of liquid and a powerful fragrance instantly filled the air. Whoa, that's strong. The scent was so overpowering it made me gag. The cologne on Gray was nothing compared to this. Gray immediately shoved the cork back in and tried to stand up to open a window. Hey. Bro. The chain. Because we were still attached, his movement yanked me forward, and I stumbled, landing right on his chest. TSK, that felt nice. I couldn't resist giving his chest a little squeeze, but my wrist was caught a second later. Gray gripped my wrist, his eyes incredibly deep in the dim light. If you keep touching me, I'm going to assume you're doing it on purpose. I looked up. What? Gray's hand tightened. You don't know what was in that bottle, do you? It was the aphrodisiac they left behind. As he spoke, the scent of the spilled liquid quickly spread throughout the bedroom. A sweet, sultry, and suggestive aroma hung in the air between us. We stared at each other for a few seconds before Gray looked away first. I'm going to open the window. He started to get up, but I gave the chain a slight tug, hooking his waist and pulling him back onto the bed. We were even closer now. Gray propped himself up over me, one hand pinning my hand to his belt. His eyes were dark, like a predator lying in wait. Christina? I smiled softly, pushing myself up until my lips were almost touching his earlobe. Of course I know what that was. Gray, I'm doing this on purpose. And then we spent the night lost in a whirlwind of passion, forgetting the world existed? Not exactly. I'd only been kissing Gray for about 2 minutes when I started to feel like I couldn't breathe. At first, I thought it was just the classic first-time kisser problem of not knowing how to come up for air. But after another 10 seconds, Gray suddenly pulled back. Christina, your breathing isn't right. I was dazed. Huh? Gray stopped kissing me altogether and swept me up into his arms, heading for the door. Christina, do you have any allergies? Or asthma? You're not breathing properly. I tried to speak, but when I opened my mouth, I felt like I was only breathing out, not in. My face was turning a deep shade of red. Seeing this, Gray moved even faster. He carried me out of the bedroom, threw open a window for ventilation, and found an asthma inhaler in the first aid kit. After a few puffs, I finally started to feel better. Are you okay? Gray wiped the sweat from my forehead, sighing in relief. You must be allergic to something in that scent. My mind went to a strange place. So that really was just your regular cologne? So my blushing was just because I'm a degenerate? Gray tapped me on the head. What else? Did you think I'm some kind of pervert who uses aphrodisiacs as cologne? I bumped his chin with my head. You always smell so good. Are you trying to seduce me on purpose? A good girl like me can't handle that kind of temptation. Gray laughed at that, his expression knowing. Do I need cologne for that? He glanced down. I thought this was enough. I followed his gaze and was shocked. Whoa, bro, you're still at attention after all that? You're seriously gifted. A vein pulsed on Gray's forehead. No, I'm just, naturally. He was a civilized man. He couldn't bring himself to finish the sentence. But I wasn't civilized. I understood. I giggled. I get it. You're just naturally big. Right, speaking of big. Before I could finish, Gray's lips were on mine again. One of his hands moved to the small of my back, pressing down firmly. How big? Why don't you find out for yourself, Christina? And then the magic happened. The experience was good. Very good. So good that I could ignore the aches and pains the next morning. The party was over, the yacht was docked, and the crooked-nosed woman and her bestie were being handed over to the police. I have to say, that fortune teller she hired was spot on. A jail cell certainly takes care of room and board. But I glanced at Gray, who was leaning against the headboard, playing with my hair. I was still confused. So what was the deal with that party the bodyguard was talking about? Gray sneered. That idiot. He overheard me on the phone and thought I was going to some sleazy party, but he only heard the first half. He completely missed the part where I turned them down. I got it. So this was a legitimate party? And running into people like Crooked Nose was just a coincidence? Of course. This party was mostly for fun. I thought you'd like it, so I brought you along for a trip out on the water. Gray looked down at me, looking a little hurt. Christina, in your mind, am I really the kind of person who would go to a depraved gathering at the drop of a hat? I felt a pang of guilt and quickly tried to soothe him. Of course not. My Gray is the purest man in the world. He couldn't even say the word big out loud. What kind of party could he possibly attend? Gray was satisfied. He leaned down and kissed my cheek. Get dressed. We need to get off the boat. It felt so good to be on solid ground again. I clutched my aching back as I breathed in the fresh air. Gray pushed a brand new wheelchair beside me. Get in. Your back isn't sore. Your feet aren't tired. I grinned. If one foot gets tired, I'll just stand on the other one. Gray chuckled. I see you're looking to call me daddy again. Didn't you get enough of that last night? Hey, how could his shamelessness fluctuate so much? Just as I was about to fire back a retort, I heard a car horn in the distance. It grew louder and louder until a red Ferrari screeched to a halt in front of us. The door opened, and a tall, beautiful, and elegant woman stepped out. She gave Gray a wink. Well, if it isn't my dear fiancé. Long time no see. Already moved on to your next chapter? The moment I saw the woman, Gray didn't seem as nervous as I expected. He glanced at me before nodding at her. Long time no see. The woman huffed, then her gaze shifted to me. Ooh, she cooed. Not bad taste. A little less stunning than me, of course, but still a beauty. I was speechless for a second. Sophie, if you're going to compliment someone, just do it. Stop trying to one-up me. The woman tooted and tapped me on the head with her sunglasses. You've got some nerve, little Christina. Not even a hello, big sister. She looked down at my foot. What happened to your leg? I pointed at Gray. He hit me with his car. What? Sophie's eyes widened dramatically. I thought you two were already head over heels in love. I was waiting for my marriage alliance to get called off. You're telling me this guy is already abusing you? Yes, this gorgeous, wealthy woman was Sophie, my sister, 4 years my senior. And yes, I was indeed the second daughter of a rich family. But I was a rebellious youth. I didn't want to be forced into an arranged marriage like my sister, so I ran away from home to make it on my own. Gray clearly knew all of this. On the way back, he said to me, I thought you recognized me, but you really didn't. I blinked. What do you mean? Gray gently brushed a stray hair from my forehead, a soft smile on his face. At your sister's engagement party, you were only 18, right? You had just gotten back from overseas. You rode your motorcycle straight into the ceremony hall, pulled off your helmet, and looked so wonderfully defiant. 18-year-old Christina was fearless and bold, sitting on her motorcycle with her chin held high. "Sis, just say you don't want to marry him, and I'll get you out of here right now." "Actually, your sister and I had already made a deal," Grace said with a helpless smile. "We were never going to get married. The engagement was just for show, to stabilize our family's business partnership and reassure everyone." But 18-year-old Christina didn't know that. She burst in like a wildcat, all claws and fire, vibrant and untamed. And just like that, she rode her motorcycle straight into Gray's heart. "I recognized you the moment I saw you at the club. You haven't changed a bit. Still reckless enough to try and scam me after a fender bender." Gray smiled as he spoke, a different kind of smile than before. It was warm and gentle. "And then, you tried to scam me out of my person, too." He was glad she had. It saved him the trouble of trying to manufacture a reason to meet her. He was terrible at lying to people he cared about, and his excuses were as clumsy as his story about his date canceling for the yacht party. I listened quietly, a storm brewing in my heart. I truly hadn't recognized Gray at the club. Back then, all my attention had been on Sophie. I hadn't spared a glance for the groom. But I started to suspect something when Gray mentioned that running away was a family tradition. After all, the rumors at the time were that after I crashed the engagement, Sophie ran away with me. But that wasn't what happened. Sophie had walked me out of the hall, explained the situation, and told me to study hard and become financially independent so I could choose the life I wanted. Thinking of this, I raised an eyebrow, as bold and defiant as I was back then. "Gray, you've appeared on the path I've chosen for myself. Now I'm inviting you to walk the rest of it with me. What do you say?" The smile in Gray's eyes grew brighter. He leaned in close, and his kiss landed on my forehead along with the spring breeze. "Of course," he whispered. "The road ahead is long. I'm all yours."